Before you start the video, I realized after the fact, thanks to user FreeCU, that there was the ability to update the firmware on this controller, which drastically improved the compatibility with Switch 2. New parts have been added, old parts have been removed, so that it further reflects my updated thoughts after updating the firmware. Anything that reflects the previous video simply means it hasn't been updated after the firmware, but I will say the fact that Retro Fighters are putting out firmware for this controller will definitely change my conclusion, so stay tuned for that as it changed some of the opinions that I have about the Retro Fighter BattlerGC Pro. I want to thank you for clicking on the video, thank you very much, and I also want to thank Retro Fighters for sending the BattlerGC Pro for review. That has no impact on my opinion, so money changed hands. Let's start this. The GameCube was legendary, such a great generation, and emulation kept it alive, but recently it's also been receiving a second breath thanks to the Switch 2 now having GameCube titles being added to the eShop. The BattlerGC Pro from Retro Fighters, it retails for $59.99 US and comes in 3 colors, black, glacier, and purple. Embodies the GameCube shape, the GameCube button style, which is unique, Bluetooth 2.4, Hall effect sticks, vibration, extra buttons, accurate D-pad with integrated switches, some information on how to program, how to pair, nice little manual that is so small that could pretty much be a cheat sheet, very easy to keep aside, and I like that it's printed in color. A braided cable, nice. In the box we also have this, which I suspect is going to be your 2.4 gigahertz dongle, and indeed it is, but the interesting part is that we're using a GameCube connector. It is not going to work for your PC, it's really for if you have a Wii or a GameCube, which unfortunately I'm not going to be able to test. And then here we have the PC dongle, because this one using an USB-A will be able to be connected to your PC. And now looking at the controller itself, kind of wish I had a different mouse pad. It was just a little too blue. Okay. Controller membrane for the face buttons, they feel fairly stiff, very traditional kind of feel for your face buttons, fairly silent, but if you push them hard you'll hear that thump. The D-pad has tactile buttons, definitely more audible and definitely larger than what I remember from the original GameCube controller. Both your sticks are Hall effect and both have the octagonal shape. I always loved doing that with a GameCube controller. I don't know if you guys were there during the GameCube era and if you did that, but man, I would do that all the time. This feels extremely satisfying. Both Hall effect, they both click, modernized in terms of a controller in comparison to what the original GameCube was. They have a little, just a smidge more travel than the GameCube one, but it still has that very tactile feedback. However, it's muted. You hear it, but you don't hear it as much. As for the triggers, oh my god, these are satisfying. You have your analog portion, but you can hear it at the end that I can still click it like the GameCube. This is way more satisfying than the original controller as far as the dual stage. I would assume that when playing on GameCube and Wii, the dual stage will work. I don't expect it will work, unfortunately, when used on a Switch 1 or Switch 2 with GameCube controllers. You have your USB-C up top. You have what I would assume is a pairing. Actually, no, that's the capture button, okay? You have your select, start, your home. All of these buttons are tactile. You don't have any 3.5mm jack or anything like that. You do have back paddles. The back buttons are tactile, also very muted, and you have your switch to go from 2.4 gigahertz or Bluetooth. And so you do have a rumble. I actually just felt it. They are rotary motor. You can sort of see them through. It's a little hard to see, but they're there. In the spec sheet, they talked about Kale micro switches. I would assume the only thing to be Kale micro switches is the dual stage, because everything else feels tactile to me. The gyro definitely works on the Switch 1, but I haven't had it work elsewhere, at least when plugging on a PC or something like that. Let's start by connecting it wired and run it through some tests. Here's the interesting part. Right here, it says Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which is what this controller is spoofed as in terms of the name. However, it's obviously an Xbox controller, and this means that this is effectively spoofed as an X input product. That aligns with what is in the manual. I'm just a little curious as to why they spoofed the name Nintendo Switch Pro controller, but the protocol being used is X input. It's unlikely that this could cause issues, but it's not impossible. With that said, A is A and B is B. So if I hold B to back out, I'm going to do that. And I'll show you another thing important with the fact that it's X input. If I go specifically in the settings of the controller using Steam, you'll notice that we have joystick, we have output, we don't have anything else. The X input protocol does not support gyro. Here's another thing I did not expect. So it would seem that the wired mode does not allow you to switch from X input to D input. I've been doing the command that should switch it and it's not doing anything. So maybe there's another command that I'm not aware of, but even looking at the manual now, it doesn't even talk about operation when being wired. So I would assume that they have made this controller, at least in its design, to be used primarily through Bluetooth or 2.4 gigahertz. I guess the wired mode is there, but it's really not designed to be used like that. I'll still include it in the performance, but just know that I'm unable to switch from X input to D input, which according to the manual, I should be able to do with no problems using the dongle. Now, all the same, I am on the X input protocol. I can rumble, which by the way, I do feel, so that works fine. Now this time around, let's see if I hold minus and plus, if something happens. And it did. That's why the window shut. That's because it moved to the input protocol. And when moving there, it's called the retro bit controller. So if we go to test device inputs, well, look at that. I guess they went for a traditional PlayStation profile, but you know, if it has this schematic here of the PlayStation controller, that means that they probably submitted their the input protocol to Steam at some point, or they're tapping on a pre-existing one. But we still don't seem to have dual stage input being supported through that protocol. That's a little bit of a disappointment, because this is exactly the kind of thing that the input would be able to do. However, the X input wouldn't. So what I'm saying here is, as I'm pushing, you can tell by the number that I'm having the max value. Now, if the dual stage was supported, when I push it down, you would see something light up, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So that feature, as I suspected, will only work when you're being on a GameCube or a Wii. So unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to test it, even though I will try it on the Switch one a little later. And just to clarify, just in case, this controller does not have a companion app, and so for software, we'll just move forward and go straight into the audio test. I'm refilming this specific portion because my circle error was not exceptional. There was no instructions on how to calibrate the sticks in the manual. However, they do have instructions on the website. So I'm going to start by recalibrating the gyro. And the way to do this is you want to hold home and plus for a couple of seconds. Now, I tried to do this wired, by the way, it didn't work. You should see LED 1 and 4, and it's going to go off to know that it's calibrated. So now it should be recalibrated. So that's good. And for the sticks, you want to press home to turn it on. Then you want to hold A, B, and minus at the same time. So all four will lit up. Now we're in calibration mode. We want to rotate each of the sticks one at a time, 5 to 6 times in uniform speed, they say. So that's 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to do an extra one just to be safe. And then want to click each trigger 2, 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Each time, and press A to get out. All right, so now the controller should be calibrated. Let's go see what the sticks look like in GamePad Tester. For the record, they don't recommend calibrating if everything works great. Considering the test that I had originally, I decided to do so. It's not that much better in the sense that left side and right side are not super consistent, but it's also not a controller where this should matter a whole lot. So look, I'm not impressed with those numbers, basically because they're inconsistent, but I don't think it's going to matter for the games I'm going to play this with. Stick tremor, I'm not perceiving any. Axis snapping, we do have some. We don't have a whole lot of it, but there's definitely axis snapping. You can see here that I can pretty much move, and it's not changing the value on the y-axis. So we definitely have axis snapping on this controller. Stick snapback, which is going to be very important for Smash players. Let's see if we have some. I mean, we do have a little bit, but it does seem like there may be a little bit of algorithm at play to try to prevent being too egregious but it's there. Inner dead zone, it's obvious that there's a little bit, but it's not too crazy. If anything, the axis snapping is going to be more problematic paired with a little bit of dead zone. That might be hard to work with, especially at the center portion of your sticks. Gap dead zone, I would assume that there isn't, because the jump seems to be consistent in numbers. Outer dead zone, you definitely have a fair amount of it. Now, I've come to not dislike that as much as an inner dead zone, but it's there. Stick tension, they're both the same at 70 to 75 TGF. And stick resolution is at 0.0078, so there's nothing special with this stick. And in fact, even when I did the circularity test, you must have noticed that the circle, albeit I was doing it quite fast, was not always picking up. So this is a pretty run-of-the-mill, so to speak, Hall effect sticks. So it won't drift, but you know, I can already tell you that's not going to be a stick for shooting, not at all. But also it's consistent with the no gap dead zone. All right, let's move to D-pad testing. Diagonal focus, I'd say 50-50. Like, it's not hard, but the shape is so abrupt that if you operate the D-pad from the edges, it's hard to do. But if you're closer to the center, it'll be for the most part fairly easy to do. Rolling test, I mean, it's definitely a D-pad that I would consider to have sharp corners, but all things considered, it's not unpleasant to do it with. I'm a little surprised by that. I don't usually like these kinds of D-pads, but whatever it is with the material, it's actually quite satisfying to roll on. I wouldn't say I'd go at it for 4 hours, but it's also not something that would bother me after 15 minutes. Adjacent directions, feasible for sure, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's easy. I'm applying quite a lot of pressure to be able to do it efficiently. It's almost like the pressure that you're applying on the D-pad is allowing you to adjust that on the fly. It's kind of unique, but with a lot of pressure, it's definitely feasible. Accidental inputs. Well, seems fine as far as I'm concerned. And I mean, it's not impossible, but very hard to do even on your left-right. Center pivot. There is, like, you feel a flex. It's not impossible to actuate no buttons, so it's a proper pivot, but it's really hard to do. It's such a stiff D-pad that I don't know, like, yes, it's feasible, but that's where I realized this D-pad feels very different to what I'm used to seeing on, I want to say 90% of controllers, and it is that it does require a fair amount of pressure to actuate, so I don't know that it would be comfortable for long duration on center pivot, because you do have to press a fair amount to be able to operate it from the center. And moving to trigger testing, the start of the dead zone, oh my gosh, there is a lot of it. Wow, okay. There's a lot of start dead zone on those triggers. And dead zone, well, that's going to be hard to measure up because you have the switch. Effectively, I would say that this completely eliminates end dead zone because you have a feedback to let you know when you're pushed all the way. One thing to keep in mind is once you activate the end trigger, the micro switch, I mean, you still have a little bit of play. So dampening is present. It really doesn't matter on this controller. I'd say, in fact, it's quite satisfying because you're still getting that feedback. So at the sake of not having the dual stage, or at least I don't believe so, you still have something that is quite unique and quite satisfying that we don't see a whole lot of. You know that you're always going to reach that dead zone because of that micro switch. It's quite satisfying to use those triggers. And then hair trigger, for the proper meaning of what it is, no, you don't really have hair triggers on this controller. There's no switch to shorten the distance. You just have a very satisfying click at the end of the actuation, but you're gonna have to go all the way to feel it and to actuate it. So there it is. And I'm basically trolling myself with trying to aim with this controller. You know, it's your typical cheap Hall effect, very jittery, very jumpy, as you can see. And with axis snapping and low resolution, it's not a stick made for aiming. It's hardly going to be a stick for camera action, to be honest. It's not great in that regard. but the feeling is nice. I do feel like it's a controller that is made with a certain intent, which this intent is to reproduce the GameCube controller. And so with that in mind, it's a controller that is matching that era. I don't think it's modernized in terms of the hardware that you have nowadays. The reality is it's not the best, but it's not the worst, because what it doesn't have in precision, I think it has in pleasantness of use. I wouldn't even say ease of use, because I don't know that yet, but pleasantness of use, yeah, there's something that I like about that D-pad. But yeah, it's your, how can I put this? It's your, I'm comfortable going into an experience that invoke a certain nostalgia, a certain approach, but it is not what I would go for fighters, not at all. So how about platformers? Well, let's find out. Definitely more pleasant here, and in fact, I'd say quite satisfying as a whole. This is much better for these types of games, these types of solutions for the D-pad, because you know, you have that big arrow, which is quite satisfying, and also very easy to know that you're not hitting the key wrong or in the wrong direction. If you're trying to be fast on it, this D-pad is going to be quite reliable long term, in my opinion. I am struggling. I'd say the struggle does not come from the controller or the D-pad. The struggle comes from my brain just trying to wrap around the fact that I'm using a GameCube controller and pushing buttons in places I would not expect to push them. That D-pad is also, because it's so hard to actuate, it's a little challenging to work with, and I'm getting signal drops. Like for example, here I just dashed and my character did not, and I think that has to do with the rather very low polling rate and maybe not ideal latency that I'm getting from that dongle experience. And so yeah, it's jump requires such a precise input, such a like milliseconds precisions. I feel like it's just this controller is showing where it lacks for these types of games. Comfort, leisure kind of platformers, yes. Try hard, sweaty, competitive, best timings kind of approach, no, not the controller for that. I mean, despite the massive dead zone that this controller has, it actually has very satisfying triggers. It's one of the highlights of this product, if not the highlight. That and the octagonal shape and material that they're using for your sticks. But those triggers, they feel so satisfying. And you know, there's something like, I wish we could calibrate them. Essentially, if we could remove some of that initial dead zone, even make it so that 100% is only when you click them, I think that would ultimately give so much more positive to this product. Unfortunately, we're not able to make all those decisions for ourselves. We're stuck with whatever is there. The operation is nice too. It's just I can feel that in some areas, because we're not able to tweak them, it's just not gonna represent what you'd want out of those triggers. And for example, here, I would love to use the micro switch to know when I'm like full throttle, and anything before that would be partial to how much I pushed a button. But this is not the case, because as you push it down, since the dual stage is not supported everywhere, as you push it down, even if you don't hit that micro switch, you're already at 100%. So in a game like Pocket Cards, for example, it's super satisfying to reach that micro switch, but it's also pointless. So it's hard to recommend for racing also. This is an off button. I just realized that now. I thought it was a pairing button, but that's actually an off button. To put in pairing, what you want to do is hold home for a couple of seconds, and then it'll start juggling fast like a Switch Pro controller would. It just connected to my Switch. All right, so one of the big things is now through Bluetooth, without issue, you can connect to the Switch 2, which was not the case before. It was working wired every now and then, but it was inconsistent. Now it works wired, it works Bluetooth. One thing that still doesn't work, unfortunately, is the dual stage triggers. And I'm gonna redo this entire section because even in my previous video, I had buzzed the audio, so might as well go ahead and do it. Super Mario Sunshine is the best example to showcase what dual stage triggers are capable of doing. Now in the GameCube, originally when the game came out, when you partially held the trigger, it would make more or less water spout of a flood depending on how deep you would push your triggers. Now here, it doesn't matter, it pushes the exact same amount. And what it did, whenever you would push it partially, Mario would be able to run, but whenever you pushed it all the way, it would make Mario stand still. He would no longer run, and you would control where the water is being spouted instead. Now, unfortunately, this controller does not support that feature, so really the only way to have the dual stage trigger work is if you use the GameCube dongle. I'm hoping that this is something they can update down the road through software or firmware update. But let me show you what I mean with a controller that's actually capable of doing what I was trying to show you. So right now, I haven't addressed my triggers so that they have all the flexibility that the original ones had. So it's a little difficult to spout water closer or further, but that's something that I could fully address with the controller. But you'll notice here that Mario moves, and if I push a trigger all the way, it makes Mario stand still. Now I can control him instead. Now this is still something that you can do in the Switch version of Super Mario Sunshine because they mapped it to a different button if you're using a controller that is not the GameCube one. But I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like when you have the dual stage trigger and a game that supports that feature, which there are very few of. So to be fair, how much of that are you going to need? Probably very little. But it's a cool feature to have nonetheless. And also, if you do have the GameCube adapter that Nintendo basically doesn't sell anymore, so you're going to pay an arm and a leg to get it, if you still have that adapter, you can use the BattlerGC Pro and have that feature, but you're going to have to run the dongle through the adapter. One last time, just to show you what I mean, even if I push all the way, it doesn't stop Mario, but you can do it with this button, and it's gonna make him stand still. If you were to play a GameCube title in the Switch 2 that do support the dual stage triggers, for example F-Zero GX does, you won't have that feature with this one. To show you one last thing, and probably the best way to confirm what mode you're on, this is the Switch 2, and if we go to test input device on controllers, you'll see here if I push down, nothing happens, but if I push all the way, what comes up is R and L, which are not what the buttons are called on the Pro controller. So now let me go ahead and switch to the BattlerGC Pro, and do the same test. And just to show you that it works, if I do A, and now if I push just partially, it picks up ZR, it picks up ZR, and it picks up ZL, which is what the buttons are called on the Switch Pro controller and Joy-Cons. And so that's just to show you, these are the L and R, but if I go back to the other controller and do this once again, and this time I push these extra buttons, you'll notice here that what it'll do is ZR and ZR again, because these are just duplicatas. This is being perceived as a GameCube controller, whereas this, at least at this point in time, cannot do that on the Switch 1 and Switch 2, whether you're wired, whether you're on Bluetooth. The only way that you're going to be able to do it is by using the GameCube specific dongle, but I'm pretty sure you have third-party adapters that you could buy that won't probably cost an arm and a leg. Retro Fighters have a battle dock for Switch 2, and I'll try to see if they can send one for review. But based off of what I'm seeing here, that battle dock should be able to let you use the BattlerGC Pro with the dual stage action triggers. And if truly that can do that, I mean, there are literally zero reasons to get the first party controller from Nintendo. Anyway, stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll be able to review that for you guys, but more on that later. When it comes to performance, everything will be on screen, but it goes to show that's just not the controller for that kind of approach. That's not the controller for that kind of expectation. It is a controller that is designed to give you a retro, a nostalgic kind of feel for GameCube games. It is not offering an updated or modernized approach in terms of performance, in terms of protocol in general. Before we close the performance chapter, when I did my initial tests, I didn't know about the firmware. I don't know what firmware I was on, so I redid a string of tests because one of their firmware says that they improve latency. As far as what I could capture, everything was consistent except the pulling rate that was a little bit better. The button and stick latency was about the same. Let's move towards the end of the video. Okay, so it does wake up switch 1. Battery, according to Retro Fighters, it will last approximately 10 plus hours. I like how it looks. I like what it stands for. There's not a whole lot of GameCube controller options on this market. Truth be told, the main reason for which someone could be interested in buying this is one I'm unable to test, which is going to be the GameCube and Wii connectivity using their wireless dongle. So that completely changes my thoughts in terms of the conclusion of the BattlerGC Pro. Now that it works very well for the Switch 2, it completely transforms the meaning and the purpose of this controller. Is it a controller that you would buy to double down as a PC controller? I don't think it is, but it's nice that it can still do it. It's just not built for that. It's really specifically built for GameCube, built for Switch, where the performance may feel lacking on the PC. It's going to perform very on par with the market when talking about the Switch, GameCube, and Wii. And so I think, considering the price point, which is quite affordable at $59.99 for what it is, I think it's absolutely fine. I think it feels good for the platform that it's meant to be used, and thankfully it's been fully updated for the Switch 2. If somehow they can make that USB mode work like a GameCube adapter, it would make it a killer option. Ideally, we would be able to swap from a Switch Pro mode to a GameCube controller mode. If we can do that, that would be phenomenal, because the other controller I showed you, quite frankly, is almost 3 times the price, and it doesn't feel as good in terms of like the hardware. It does not feel as good as this controller. So, you know, the BattlerGC Pro has a lot going for it, especially now that I know that there are future firmware updates. So hopefully they can bring that feature. It's not a mandatory feature, but it's a feature that would just skyrocket this controller to new heights. So hopefully, you know, we'll see. Anyways, that is it for the conclusion. As always, let me know your thoughts. Please make sure to comment in the video if you have any inputs, any feedback, and to subscribe to not miss any future video, and to like it if you did enjoy the content. I'm Clef, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.